What's your best idiot neighbor story? My parents' house is on top of a hill, and our backyard had an awesome downhill for sledding. The hill had like 2 or 3 big trees on it, but was otherwise clear. We moved in when I was 2, 3. The bottom of the hill was this flat space with a bunch of dead trees and rocks. Every day for about 10 years my dad moved the dead trees into the nearby woods and tossed every rock he could find over there. By the time we were old enough to sled, we could do so safely, and the place was a great area to sled. This particular chunk of land was unallocated and part of no plot, strictly speaking. Given local laws, my father caring for the unallocated land for 10 years with proof that land got absorbed into our plot ownership. Well, at some point halfway through, the neighbor at the bottom of the hill builds this huge ugly metal fence enclosing his part, which was his yard, and a third of the cleared area. That was annoying. But whatever. Well, he yelled at us anytime we played in the other spot or sledded down the hill. He was a former police officer, and he had 2 dogs that were retired police dogs. Why were these dogs retired? They were considered overly violent. How do we know this? Because he likes to brag about it. His reasoning for why we shouldn't play there was because it would drive his overly violent dogs nuts. We ignored him and kept playing. Well, one summer, to discourage us from sledding in the winter, he planted a wall of trees along the bottom of our hill. These were all maybe 6, 8 feet tall, with trunks an inch or 2 wide. We just shrugged and kept sledding, killing the trees in our way. A bit of a dick move on our part perhaps, but amusingly enough it turns out the spot he planted the trees was actually part of our plot. It wasn't on the unallocated spot, so when he threatened to sue, my dad, a lawyer, just laughed and pointed it out. The guy basically gave up after that point, except that whenever he saw us playing back there, he let the dogs out into the yard, so we'd be playing soccer or whatever. Meanwhile these dogs were constantly sticking their snouts through the fence, growling and snapping at us. I love dogs. My family has 2 of them. But these 2 dogs were honestly everything I'd imagine someone thinks of when they call dogs vicious animals. There was a big hubbub in the neighborhood twice when the dogs bit people and attacked other dogs during the guy's walk. He paid their medical bills, but suffered no other issues and was able to keep the dogs. He got special dispensation from the local police department. It was also during this period of time, incidentally, that his own daughter had to get 10 stitches on her arm because one of the dogs went full on takedown mode on her in their home. We have a neighbor who isn't all there, but she does some silly funny things. Once we got a call at our door. It was a pair of Jehovah's Witnesses. After they were done with us, they went next door. We saw them walk across from our window towards our crazy neighbor's house. 15 seconds later they sprinted past our window in the opposite direction with said crazy neighbor's pursuit. The neighbor who places his yard sprinkler right on the property line adjacent to our driveway so that it soaks our cars. Haha. This reminds of my grandma's old neighbors. They would park on the street in front of her house and then get furious when the automatic sprinklers get their precious Jaguar wet, like knocking on her door and yelling in her face mad, as if an old ass lady is supposed to monitor when someone is parked on the street outside and go change around the settings on her sprinkler system. I fixed the schedule for her once she told me about it to keep the peace, but you can be damn sure that when she passed away those damn sprinklers were going on for 3 minutes a day, every day, in the late afternoon when they were home, until that house sold. Nobody ducks with my nana. Second story, same neighbor. One Saturday night, around 8 p.m., I heard a commotion outside. Some dude in a pickup truck had pulled up in front of my neighbor's house and they were in a shouting match. It looked like it was about to get ugly, and pickup truck dude had a lot more rage. So I called the police in part to protect my neighbor. When they each got weapons out, 911 dispatched a car. By the time the law arrived, pickup truck guy had left cops talk to my neighbor. All he had to do was smile and say all was well, or finger the other guy. But no, he got belligerent with the cops. So they hooked him up and took him away. His brother was there and the cops told him to go home. He walks to his car with a cop right behind him. The car is in front of my house, so I can see and hear everything. He looks at the cop and says, "I've been drinking all day. If I get hit this car, you're going to arrest me." "Yes sir," replies the cop. So, cops give this drunk a ride home. Less than an hour later, drunk has gotten a ride back to his vehicle. I'm standing at my from the door. He sees me and yells, "What the duck are you looking at?" "Nothing." "Well, I'm going to bail my brother out and we are coming back to duck you up." "For what?" "I have no idea. I was trying get to protect his sorry ass." As soon as he leaves, I call the police station to tell them what happened and to say he'd threatened me. I'm on the phone with the cop for a few minutes. Then he asks me my neighbor's name. I tell him. Cop laughs and says, "Yeah, we just arrested his brother Ford as he pulled in our parking lot." Short after the neighbor moved away, have the peace restored. Idiot neighbor called the cops on me for coming home at 11 p.m. We shared a driveway that connected our adjacent parking areas and the rear of our houses. 5 minutes after I got home, an annoyed city cop knocks on my door telling me the old lady and her husband next door filed a complaint about me making a bunch of noise, which consisted of me parking my car and all the noises associated with that, and opening my house door. He said to try to keep it quiet, but there's nothing he can really do aside from showing up every time they call to complain. The next day I knocked on their door to see what the problem was and how we could resolve it. Old lady says nobody should be out gallivanting around at 11 p.m. I explained to her that I was coming home from work and that this would happen at least 5 nights a week. So she says, "Why don't you just get a normal job working normal hours so you aren't bothering us while we are watching TV?" That's right. They weren't even trying to sleep when they filed the noise complaint. They were awake and watching TV. Maybe they lost the remote. I knew I couldn't win. So I did what any good neighbor would do, and I started a punk rock band. We didn't even try to sound good. Just as annoying as possible. When I was little I had these neighbors that lived by the theory, God giveth, God taketh away. So they would never take leaves or clear their driveway of snow and ice, because they figured if God wanted them to be able to drive then he'd make it warmer. This happened a couple of days ago, so I'm still rather annoyed. We live in a small block of flats. 6 floors, parking garage. 39 flats. We had just returned from a big shopping trip and were waiting in the garage for the lift. Waited a few minutes. Hear it move. Hear lots of giggling and banging. 5 minutes more. Still no lift. My partner went to see what was going on. The awful kids had jammed the lift open using a screwdriver and were running around like crazy. No parents in sight. Now the lift isn't working. I said on the building's FB page that we caught the kids messing with it. But do the parents take any responsibility? No. They just keep saying that there must have been an automatic problem with the lift, even though we caught them. The joke is on them. I'm on the ground floor. The annoying families now have to drag prams etc. up 6 floors, just because they are unable to discipline their kids. Long story short, power goes out to the neighborhood. My generator turns on. Neighbor calls concerned that the generator is taking power from the neighborhood. Duck in Brad. The most idiotic neighbor I had was this woman we live next to on a council estate. From day one of her moving and it was a catastrophe. Constant banging on the walls. Screaming. Loud music, you name it. They partied on any day of the week. The music so loud our beds would vibrate. One night we heard screaming outside on the front and I remember my mum grabbing us all out of bed and shouting there was a fire next door. She dragged us outside in case the fire spread. Our houses were all connected. So there we are. My mum, older brother, younger sister and myself stood on the pavement in our PJs, watching while my neighbor stands in front of her house shrieking, while her house is billowing smoke and all of the party goers scurry out of the doorway and down the street, leaving her to deal with this herself. Her 3-year-old son was left to wander up and down road during all of this. She doesn't call 999 herself because she's still off at whatever. The fire brigade came and put it out and gave her a good barlicking about it. Turns out it was a deep fat fryer fire. They had all got so ducked up on whatever it was they were taking they had all passed out and left the burner on and the oil pan had exploded and set their entire kitchen on fire. I remember a few weeks later being in the back garden of my house and you could see through their kitchen window that my neighbor hadn't bothered to clean up the singed black wall ceiling or make any attempt to paint over it. You could actually see where fat had splattered all up the walls and burned onto the wallpaper. This same neighbor's boyfriend also once threatened to slash my mum's throat once because she went over to tell them to turn the music down after months of having it thumping through the walls. Thankfully, she moved out after a year or so, leaving behind the blackened kitchen and doors kicked off their hinges. I was an idiot neighbor, or a crazy one. When my son was a newborn he was very colicky and barely slept for more than a few hours at a time. I was so tired and literally losing my mind. There was a house of old bikers down the street and they would constantly drive down our road and rev their engines. I mean, my husband's rides. I know it is possible to drive down the street and rattle windows. It would wake the baby up. So I went down there and asked very nicely. I said, "Hey guys, I know it's your street too, but I have a young baby who you wake up every time you do that. Can you guys just not rev your engines on the street?" They seemed super cool about it and I was so thankful. But it made it worse, not better. Now it was like a game to really rev when they went by my house. It became like the telltale heart and started to drive me mad. Every time I heard it, I became one step closer to buying a machine gun and mowing them down. I became completely irrational one day and stormed down the street. I burst into their backyard where they were hanging and yelled at them like a crazy person. Threatened to kick their asses, call the cops, slash their tires, whatever it took for them to stop ducking revving their engines. It finally stopped, but I'm still embarrassed by how crazy I acted. Sleep deprivation is a heck of a drug. Our bulk trash day is on Saturdays. We were doing a lot of remodeling in our house, so we had a lot to put out over the course of 2 months. The last set of stuff we put out on neighbors parked in front of it on the curb, and I woke up the next morning to find a little tag on my trash that basically said, "Sorry, we couldn't get to your trash." Irritated because the junk had to sit on the corner for a whole week because we weren't about to haul it back into our backyard to just haul it back out again. It sat there for another week. And guess what? They did it again the next week. What made us mad was that they didn't park there at any other time in the week. They did that only on Friday nights, so the trash couldn't be picked up on Saturday mornings. So I took the initiative and parked at the spot on Friday night, then got up early Saturday morning to move my car. The trash finally got picked up after 3 weeks. Fast forward 3 or so weeks later, the idiot did the same thing to his own trash, so his bulk stuff stayed out there for multiple weeks. I just relocated my junk to the other side of my yard, so my stuff could get picked up while his stuff stagnates. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.